February 17th, 1864. 9 o'clock at night. 8 men, an iron tube, several miles off the coast of South Carolina. The only sound is the rhythmic clank-clank of a hand crank turning a propeller in the dark. They are moving toward a warship they cannot fully see. Before the night is over, they will make history, and then they will vanish. The Civil War was going badly for the South at sea. The Union Navy had tightened its blockade along thousands of miles of southern coastline, sealing off major ports, choking trade, and slowly starving the Confederacy of resources. Cotton couldn't get out. Supplies couldn't get in. The South was being strangled, and there was little it could do above the water. 3 men had a different idea. A Louisiana lawyer named Horace Lawson Hunley, an engineer named James McClintock, and his partner, Baxter Watson. They weren't Navy men. They were civilians with a dangerous theory that a vessel moving underwater might slip past the blockade and strike from the shadows. Their first attempts were disasters. The Pioneer was scuttled to avoid capture. The American divers sank in the choppy waters of Mobile Bay. The third vessel, they named after Hunley himself. She was 40 feet long and just over 4 feet tall. Inside, it was impossible for a grown man to stand upright. 7 men sat shoulder to shoulder, turning a massive iron crank to drive the propeller. An 8th man, the captain, piloted the boat from the front. She carried primitive ballast tanks, 2 tiny conning towers, and on her bow, a 16-foot iron spar. At the tip of that spar sat a torpedo, 135 pounds of black powder. It was a simple idea, and an extraordinarily suicidal one. In the months before her final mission, the Hunley earned a grim reputation. She sank twice during training in Charleston Harbor. 13 men died in those accidents alone. Horace Hunley himself was among them, trapped inside his own invention when it flooded in October 1863. But each time the vessel was raised, new volunteers stepped forward, men who had seen the bodies pulled from the mud and still climbed inside. On the night of February 17th, Lieutenant George Dixon guided the Hunley out past Sullivan's Island. Dixon carried a $20 gold coin in his pocket, a gift from his sweetheart, Queenie Bennett. He had been carrying it since the Battle of Shiloh, where a Union bullet struck him in the thigh. The coin took the hit, saving his leg, and likely his life. He had it with him that night, a bent piece of gold inscribed with the words, "My Life Preserver." Aboard the USS Housatonic, a Union lookout spotted something low in the water, moving against the tide. The alarm was sounded. Sailors opened fire with muskets and shotguns. The rounds pinged off the iron hull like hailstones. The Hunley closed the distance, ramming her iron spar directly into the Housatonic's hull. There was no retreat. On impact, the torpedo detonated at point-blank range, catching the submarine in the heart of its own explosion. The explosion was massive. The Housatonic, a 1,200-ton warship, began to sink in less than 5 minutes. 5 Union sailors were killed. For the first time in history, a submarine had destroyed an enemy ship in combat. And then, silence. Observers at Fort Moultrie later claimed they saw a blue signal light out at sea, the prearranged sign that the mission was complete. But the Hunley never returned to the dock. No wreckage was found. No bodies washed ashore. The iron coffin had become a ghost story. It stayed that way for 131 years. In 1995, a team led by author Clive Cussler located the wreck, buried under silt in 30 feet of water. In August of 2000, the world watched as she was raised from the Atlantic. When researchers opened the hull, the mystery only deepened. The 8 crew members were still at their stations. No broken bones, no signs of a struggle to reach the hatches. The bilge pumps hadn't even been turned on. It was as if they had simply fallen asleep. Modern blast modeling suggests a terrifying answer. The shock wave from their own torpedo traveled through the iron hull and the water, killing the men where they sat. They were likely dead before the Housatonic even hit the seafloor. In 2004, the crew was finally laid to rest at Magnolia Cemetery in Charleston. Among the remains, they found George Dixon's gold coin, still bent, still bearing the mark of the bullet. The Hunley did not win the war. The blockade held, and the Confederacy fell. But on that cold February night, 8 men changed the future of naval warfare forever. Today, the Hunley sits in a conservation tank in North Charleston, slowly being cleaned of a century of salt and sand. Researchers are still uncovering her secrets, but the silence of the crew remains their most powerful legacy. They never made it home.